Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here. It's day 2 of our very first ever LAC Summit. We've still got a whole week ahead of sharing and learning. So it's so nice to see so many faces back again. And I hope you keep coming back for the rest of the week because each of these sessions have been such great learning opportunities. And before we jump in with today's session, and I introduce our speaker for today, I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about what this summit is and who we are. So my name is Emma Burns. I am the Professional Learning Coordinator at Consilience Learning, which is the company that runs the Learning Analytics Collaborative and is sponsoring this event. Also on the call is my colleague Piotr, who also, he's our Director of Data Analytics. And I know that many of you are part of the LAC already. Can we see like a show of hands? Who's a LAC member? Who's a LAC fan? Yeah, lots of us. And I think that, as we were just saying before I started recording, this is one thing that's really special about the LAC is the fact that we're a community. We've created this learning community where we have these opportunities to learn and grow from one another, which is really exciting. And what I just want to do is, if you're not familiar with the LAC, just give you a little bit of an overview of who we are and what we do. If you've got any questions after this, please reach out because we'd be really happy to show you in more detail and give you a demo call. So as you can see, we're a platform and a service for schools that want to use learning analytics to improve and to transform. Our mission is really to support you and to build cultures of data use in your school. We help schools to use data to make an impact. So what we do in practice is that we help you to collect all the data you have in the school. And that's not just your academic data. It also includes your demographics, well-being data, anything that you have. And then we collaborate with you to figure out the best way to present that data as information. And then we teach the users in your school how to use that information. So we provide protocols and tools so that your whole community can gain insight about your learners. So to show you an example, we've got over 100 pre-built visualizations for different assessments, and each one of these has been customized to answer the questions that schools have. We have, for example, dashboards for teachers to see their classes, dashboards for specialists to understand the impact of their interventions, dashboards that are aggregate data for boards, administrators, HR teams, things like that, to see data over time. And dashboards for parents and students so they can see individual learning data over time. And I'm really excited about this one because I have a feeling we might be hearing some more about it in this talk today. So we have over 50 schools in our collaborative, and we're all about sharing the learning. So when one school develops a use case or a protocol or a visualization, we share that information with other schools so that everyone can learn and grow. And so I think you can hear where I'm going with this. One of the ways we do that is in our virtual summit, which is an opportunity for schools to share where they're at, where they're going, and how they're developing those cultures. And someone who knows so much about that is Will Kirkwood. He is the LAC guru. He's part of our mastermind. A lot of the visualizations that I just showed you in those slides have been developed in consultation with Will because he's on the ground trying these things out in his school. And he's a big catalyst for a lot of the changes in the new LAC site. So we're really excited to hear what he has to say and from him and his experiences at ZIS today. He's the Educational Data and Technology Coordinator at ZIS. And yeah, did I miss anything, Will?
No, I think we're good to go.
Did I
You sold me.
well? Okay, so I'm really excited to hear what Will has to say. Over to you. Thank you so much.
All right, share my screen first of all. So, hi everyone. I know many of you from other iterations of my life or different roles I sort of play, but as sort of Emma said, my name is Will Kirkwood. I've been at Zurich International School, I've been here twice. So I am in my 11th year in this sort of stint I've been here, but I've also worked in Thailand and Norway before. So I know some of you from those iterations of my life. Oh, is my sound muddled? Is Rick's comment? Is
It's
my sound okay?
it's a little muddy, but we can hear you.
Let me just exit this and double check my audio. It was good before.
Yeah, it's a
It
little
was.
low, so it's harder to hear here.
Hmm. So,
Yeah.
let me change my
It-
internal mic and let's see if that makes a difference. Any difference?
Yes.
Okay.
Much difference, yes,
Okay.
much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, too.
Thanks, Rick. So, I've been at Zurich for a while, and as Em was saying, that we work in sort of close collaboration with LAC with all our data. Part of my role at sort of when this is my third year in this position, I was in the sort of IT side of things and instructional coaching, but I moved into this role 2 and a bit years ago. And one of the big sort of pieces of the role actually was consolidating and cleaning up the data sets we had. So on sort of Emma's little pyramid of making sure our data and the information that was going into LAC was clean, sorted by student number, and all that sort of stuff was actually a huge part of the process of making sure we had quality data in there. So then we could have the insightful, impactful conversations was a huge piece. So a recommendation, if you're sort of thinking about building your data culture, ensuring that the data you have in there is reliable, consistent, makes a huge difference. Sort of the good quality in leads to good conversations coming out of it. And for us, that involved actually, I went back with all our historical grades 5 years and re-imported them and made sure they're all accurate and sorted by the correct student number, and same with IB data. It took a while to do it. But now we're at a stage where I am 99% confident of the data that's going into the system LAC. So when a teacher goes in and looks at one of the visualizations, that it's actually presenting a picture of the reality of what that data is. So let's go in. We're going to chat about sort of the underpinnings of the beliefs behind our data-informed culture here. We'll chat about the framework we have here at school. We'll have a look at a bit of teacher practice, and I'll give you a little overview of what that looks like. Just as a sort of forewarning, I'm not going to go into our platform, our LAC platform. I have sort of mock data sets built out in Excel just to sort of anonymize the data, but we obviously have that data on our actual students inside the platform, but I'm not going in to sort of expose that data today. We'll chat about the data dispositions and the importance of sort of meeting people on their journey of where they are with data. And when we get there, we'll have a chat about parent visuals as well and how we're trying to involve the community in this broader culture. So let's go. There we go. So we have a pretty clear goal of what we want our culture to be like here at school. So our goal is to use data to inform instructional decisions, so learning can be further optimized for students here at ZIS. Students, teachers, and parents should have access to the right data at the right time, and teachers should have dedicated time to look at and discuss this data. So that's the underpinnings of the work that I'm sort of leading or collaborating on with school leadership, the senior leadership team. There is a strong belief at the school from administrators that you having the data in the right place in the right conversations can have a meaningful impact on student learning. And if we believe that, then we need to provide concrete time for teachers to actually explore it. Obviously, self-explanatory for many of us, but putting that action in practice is sometimes hard at schools, and making sure that's one of the focus areas of a school is sometimes hard to make sure it's one of the priorities. I just sort of interest to you as you're listening along I'd love to hear what you think a great data culture or a data conversation would look like. So you can drop it in the chat. I have the chat window open. I'll sort of track it as I'm going along. But if you're thinking through what would a good, rich conversation look like for you at your school, or you could break free and think about what would your ideal one look like with no limitations? So you can leave them in the chat and I'll try and track it as I'm chatting through, but I won't put anyone on the spot here. I'll keep moving through. Okay. So one of the underpinnings of our data culture at school is sort of owning the fact that our school and all schools are swimming in data. And some of you sort of might know Nate Silver's work, who I sort of a great data predictor, who has a book called The Signal and the Noise, of how can we find that signal in all this noisy data, that we want to use that data to make informed decisions, but how do we know what is the right data set? And also owning the fact that we're probably, our best guess now might not be our best guess next year, that our practice is going to need to evolve as we learn more and experience with a sort of play around about data. And I love this quote. Of course, I put your images in the way of this quote. Let me just move that out of the way. Distinguishing the signal from the noise requires both scientific knowledge and self-knowledge, the serenity to accept the things we cannot predict, the courage to predict the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it's that sort of the art of, it's like the art of teaching. The art of teaching is part science, but also part that emotional connection and sort of being aware of what is around you. And it's this constant balance, the art form of teaching and the science of teaching. And that's that confidence to sort of know when to use which skill. And so we've chatted to this with all faculty now a couple of times about that, of how do we know what is the right data set and when do we know when it's right to use? And one of the sort of another analogies we use, taken from Adam Grant's work, is just how can we think more like scientists about the data that we're presenting? We need to realize that there is sort of going to be just only a gradual change as we change our progress, that there's lots of great research out there of, yes, you can bring in a new initiative and hope it's going to revolutionize your school. But in reality, if you even just achieve a 5% change every year, that's huge change. And if you're willing to sort of invest that time to make small progress, that can be have a huge impact on students. And that thinking like a scientist is just to remain curious all the time, of one data set one year might say one thing, but next year it might say something totally different, and that's okay. So thinking like a scientist involves more than just reacting with an open mind. It means being actively open-minded. It requires searching for reasons why we might be wrong, not for reasons why we must be right, and revising our views based on what we learn. And that's that thing of, often data can sort of confirm your suspicions, your hunch, your gut reaction, but sometimes it doesn't. And actually you want to challenge it of, well, why might I be wrong? Is actually a really interesting stance to take. Okay, so here is my favorite photo of how we've sort of, or sold our, let's say, how we've built our data culture here at school. And developing a data-informed culture, been right up front with the board when we're presented to the board and the senior leadership team, but also faculty, is we can come up with a fantastic strategy, that little fish at the front. But in reality, the culture of how the community talks about data is way more important. Okay, it's not to devalue the strategy, which I'm going to talk about now, but it's positioning the strategy within the broader picture. In order for us to have effective conversations about data, we need to address how we talk about data and provide intentional times where people can talk about data. But let's chat about strategy. So one of the actions we've taken across the school over the last couple of years is having sort of landmark points where we have intentional time to collect data, but we also have an intentional time to talk about data. What that sort of looks like, this has sort of evolved a little bit this year, and I haven't changed the slides because we haven't got through that far into the year, but the concept's still the same. We have 3 divisions in our school, and we have these 3 data windows, which we call them. In the fall, like most schools, we're trying to get to know our students. In the winter, we want to check in on how they're going. In the spring, we want to review how the whole year has gone. At each division, we have really specific data sets that we want to collect and look at those points. And we make sure that data is collected before these meetings. So let's say at the lower school, there is a meeting coming up in our October PD days. There is a faculty meeting tomorrow, actually, where teachers are going to start diving into there. But that October PD day is where we're really going to intentionally look at that data. So for each of those windows, there's set data sets that we've agreed we will look at. and there is a set time in our faculty meeting structure usually, but it's in the middle and upper school, sometimes it's in team meetings, where they will look with an intentional process of how to do it. So I've set these landmark points across the school. They're set on the school calendar at the beginning of the year. People know about them and they happen. Then within that, each time there is a data conversation, we want to look at the data through the different lenses of the school. So obviously we have that classroom level discussion where we're talking about student strengths and looking at sort of groupings of students of how we want to change instruction. At that level, obviously our influence is short term. We're going to make a really immediate impact on those ones. They're the conversations that happens at most school. We've just formalized those landmark windows to make sure those processes are going on. But then at the campus level, we want to look at how are we allocating resources. So a couple of years ago in one of our grade levels, there was one class who was super heavy needs. We could see from the data from that class discussion. And then that was brought up to the divisional level of, okay, maybe that group needs an extra sort of percentage of student support to help support those students. But also that could look at the growing picture of the school over time of, well, are we seeing extra needs? Are we going to need more extension groups inside there, and tracking those broader trends across the school? So the influence of that is the short and midterm. So obviously immediate impact, but maybe looking at sort of staffing for the next school year or resourcing too. Then we want to look at it from sort of, I don't know, 10,000 feet view. Inside here is also the board discussion, where we're looking to make adjustments on our program at the school. And the influence of that is only mid and long term. So like, let's say, looking at data from the board level or the senior leadership level, we look at survey data, we look at map results, IB results. That's not to try and change what's happening at the class level this year. It's looking about over the next 3 to 5 years, how are we going to strengthen and enhance those areas? So for each one of those data windows, we have sort of set sub-meetings within there to look at the data with those different groups. So that's two things happening. Then alongside that, for each of those meetings, we have a set protocol, but we're trying to sort of develop our sort of fluency and our understanding of how we discuss and how do we think about the data we use. So we want to think about who we are, so what is our identity as an organization, and think also about what we do and the actions we take as instructors, as leaders at the school. How do we sort of think through that process and use it to look at data? So with whatever data sets, we want to be collecting data about who we are. For us, where we define our learning under conceptual understandings, competencies, and character. So that's the data we want to collect, and we sort of organize our data sets under those areas. Then we want to have a process where we're analyzing that data and overlaying it on top of each other, because as you know, let's use map results because most schools have sort of gone through that now. While that is a really rich data set, that is only a picture in time of where that student is on that day. Maybe that day they were feeling sick, they had an argument with their friend. Maybe that isn't the best representation of them overall. So then we overlay some social and emotional learning data on top of it, or the unit data inside there, which we'll chat about later. So we want to make sure we're collecting all that data and overlaying it on top of each other as we analyze it. And once we've analyzed it, here is the sort of piece which doesn't always happen in data conversations, is we want to develop some theories, some hypotheses of, well, why would this be happening? What can we do in order to have an impact on student learning? So we developed this hypothesis, and this is a process we've rolled out with faculty and we sort of touch back on. We have this process of, well, how do we form a hypothesis? We gather information, we evaluate the information, we puzzle it together to develop it. But it's that next step that is that constant tension of, we've got a theory, can we actually test that theory out? So we seek out the dissent. We try and find out, well, why might we be wrong? We reflect on that, what's going on, and we adjust our hypothesis as we're going through, sorry. So in the end, the process sort of looks something like this. We throw our data at the top into that funnel. We analyze the data. We develop our hypotheses, and then we test them out. And as you can see from that red and the green at the bottom, some of them work, some of them don't, but then we chuck them back in the funnel at the top and then match them up to other data sets. And then we go again. So we're trying to build this sort of constantly evolving process of not just having that one-off landmark conversation in the fall of going, oh, okay, these kids need some help, but these kids need some help. Let's try this, let's say 6 weeks, see what happens. What are those theories we have? And let's go back to the top of the process and start again. So there are some our underpinnings of the process we're following. So what this looks like in practice in the fall, it could be getting to know your students. We're going to collect the data as usual. We're going to have dedicated time. So we throw our in-school assessments in there, our map data, our student survey data into there. We analyze it. We have ideas to follow up. The structure of the protocol is just, hey, let's select a class that we're looking at. We look at each data set and we think about what do we notice. We note the kids who are above and below the averages. Then we look at the next data set. Then what do you notice about that? Is there alignment between these two data sets? What are the implications of our practice from these findings? Obviously, this could go on with more data sets. Repeat if there's more there. Okay. So there's the background behind it. I think I got 10 minutes. My timing's going well, so I'll keep going. So let's talk about how does that strategy sort of look like? So we're going to go for a test drive, and I'm going to sort of lead you through a process which, let's say, a grade 5, sort of grade 3, 4, 5 group of teachers might go through. So they'll be sitting down in a meeting where our meetings are usually run where all grade levels are in one large room, but a grade level is sitting at a table with their student support teacher. So they have their teaching teams working at the data, and they'll have time and they'll go into LAC or wherever we're presenting this data, and they'll log in and sort of take a look at this first data set. So as we said, the first step we go through is sort of looking at that data and sort of noting down the things you notice. So I've got a few things to, oh, my little boxes didn't appear here. Okay, I will talk it through. So we note down the student support level inside their EAL level, but as the teacher's looking through there, that student number 20 at the top there, I can see they're developing at the end there. I'm wondering if they got a high level of student support, maybe their reading's there, but much of a muchness, most kids are sort of going quite strong. I want to keep an eye out for number 20 and number 37. Obviously, these kids have names, so we wouldn't number them like this in reality. Okay. Oh, actually, no, my boxes will come up. You'll look down the columns. What do you notice? Make notes about individuals or groups, and then keep going from there. So here we go. Math unit. Here are my boxes. So you'll notice the student support level, what level they're at. I have that kid inside there. They've got EAL and student support. There's a couple of areas and that student down the bottom. So first layer of data, we've looked at our unit data. We've got our notes down. Let's overlay another set of data on top of that now. So we have our internal sort of math fluency. Let's call it timetables for the sake of this. Let's call it timetables for the sake of this. But we have that data inside LAC. Looks like this. But, oh, sorry. Playing with the chat at the same time, my own fault. Move it out of the way. As we're looking through that data where you can see what their score was and percentage of accuracy, the colors, we try and use colorways which sort of align with the map percentages across all our data sets, just to make it visually easy to see whose above level is blue, green is on level, orange is, yellow, orange, and then red. It goes through it all. So we use those colorways across all our data sets. So we've worked with LAC to talk about what would a blue be, what would a green be, just to make it easy to see quickly for teachers, especially when you're looking at data sets side by side. It's sort of a really helpful process. So have a look at your data set. Which students are below 50% fluency this time of year? Which students are 90% and above? Is there a match between the previous data set? So we had that student, we have this student here. We have the student there with only on 55%. We have that student at who wasn't going so great, number 25, who wasn't going so great in the unit, but their fluency is really high. So they've probably got some really strong fluency inside there. And that student 37 at the bottom in the unit, they weren't as strong, but they're really strong here in their fluency. So I've got that information where I'm overlaying and trying to get a detailed picture about my class. Then I've got some other outliers who we didn't previously notice. Student 22 and 24 are sort of significantly lower than other people. I need to keep that information in my head. I wonder what their results are like in the next data set. So keep going. Okay, so they've gone through that data. We introduce our third data set. So we're trying to triangulate our data here, and lots of information. We'll keep going. Describe what we see. Now we start thinking about what is the intersection between the data you see in math and the data we've collected internally. What are the potential implications of this data on teaching and learning? So we again have that student number 25. Let's highlight there as the one quite early in the unit. There was a little bit lower, the percentile sort of in the middle there. And we've got that data where there are some kids that I really want to look at. That number 37, it was only that unit data where they were missing something. I wonder if maybe they're new to the school. Maybe they're on monitor. Maybe they've just come out of EAL, and maybe that first unit was really sort of language heavy. But in every other thing, they're actually super strong. I wonder what this is telling me about that data. Then we've got those two students who are struggling in the fluency data, and now we've got some more information about them. I wonder what that means for our groupings in class. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. This is what that data looks like in LAC. We track that data over time. So you have those little, I call them snail trails. I'm sure they must have an official line over there, but you can see their progression over time in all those areas as well. So you can also see the colorways of how that would look. Okay. So then there's a follow-up discussion for the team of trying to put that all together as a team. So they've each have looked at their own class, the student support teachers looking at the grade level. Then they need to have a discussion as a team of how can we put this together? How is this going to change our instruction in the class daily or in individual cycles or across the year? So they sort of overlay that data with their unit data and their fluency data. So these conversations are super rich. Obviously, they're super engaging and they take time. So we've carved out the time where teachers can really spend that time engaging with that data and thinking through, what is that telling me about the students? Obviously, they've got in their back of their mind, or maybe in the forefront of their mind, they have student survey data, they have their anecdotal notes of how does that correlate inside there? So there's probably another magnifying glass overlaid over the top of it in order, how do we get to know our students? Okay. Ooh. Then they have a recording sheet where they go through, and as a team, they go through of all the things they look at, what they notice when they're looking at the data, and then they talk about the implications for individual classes, for groups of students, and that becomes their plan of things moving forward. As you sort of can imagine, it's a pretty rich and intense process, really interesting as sort of an outsider, because I sometimes facilitate the work. I know Catherine's in this call and she facilitates more of these conversations than I do. And just to sort of see this kind of insights that teachers come up with. And we've found committing them on paper as a collective has been a really powerful thing in order to make a commitment to move forward with that information. Okay. I'm going to pause here, just because I just want to sort of highlight of that's been our process for the last 2 years, where thinking like a scientist as a school, we're also trying to think about how can we evolve this practice to be even more impactful with the school? What are the next steps that we can go for? And it's really interesting. Our school, like many international schools, for us, we have a new lower school principal. We have a new director this year. And it's really interesting seeing the lens that they bring to the conversation and thinking through, well, how can we even be even more intentional about growing this data-informed culture and ensuring that those conversations have an impact on students? So some of the things that probably our hypotheses that we're prototyping on a macro level is there's a strong belief that these landmark conversations, these data windows, are a great building block to build further processes off there. And it also shows the weight to the community that we value these conversations across the school. Oh, I'm almost done, Emma, I promise. Exploring the ways to embed this we want to explore ways to embed this process into more frequent conversations. So some of the things we're thinking through is actually being even more intentional about overlaying our SEL data first as the first data set that we look at before we play out any other academic data. Then another area we're sort of trying with is, could we allow teaching teams to select just getting to know my students as mathematicians? Let's say choose mathematics as the key data point that they will look at during the year, and have intentional meetings in their monthly sort of meeting cycle where they keep coming back to look at just that data set. Yes, they'll look at reading and they'll still do those things because they need that for their planning. But could we be even more intentional about what is the focus area for that group to help that group of learners to move forward? So that's where we're sort of thinking about. Okay. So main show, as I said, that was only the strategy. Sounds really intense. We're super transparent about the fact of that strategy ain't going to work unless everyone buys in. And that culture is the way our group thinks, of how our teachers and our community thinks about data. So we are totally open and aware with that different people are going to have different relationships with data. Some people have had really bad experiences where their pay scale has been tied to data performance. Other people are really into and build their own spreadsheets out of that. We're okay with wherever someone is on the continuum. But what we want from our culture is everyone to be engaged in the discussion and sort of be moving along that continuum as we're sort of exploring data. So hopefully we're creating a healthy culture for data-informed discussions, which will involve meeting people where they're at, and also challenging some of their dispositions. So here are some of the words that we put out there of, this data doesn't fit with what I know about this student. This data doesn't tell me anything I don't already know. Some sort of common phrases we've heard. And we'll put these out in faculty meetings and ask groups of teachers to talk about, well, how can we sort of evolve our understanding of how we use data? Why is this data not telling you anything that you don't already know? Maybe we're not collecting the right thing, and just being upfront that it's okay to be where you're at and your comfort level with data, but let's sort of challenge and inquire about why might we be wrong in this? Okay, so we go to that's the discussion. Okay, and last sort of section, probably a minute or two away from the end, and I can field some questions afterwards. That's just, that process is looking at how we are internally, I guess, looking at data as our faculty and as our school. We wanted to make sure this is an entire community looking at data. And one of the things we've been working intensely with LAC was, how can we provide a transparent way where parents and students can see their progress over time? Yes, we have Power School where they can look at current grades. We have historical reports, which are also in Power School, but those are, and we have map data and we have IB data, but for parents, they're all in different areas. They're hard to see historically how they connect to each other. So how can a parent actually know how their child is going? We don't publish that you're coming 5th out of 30 kids in a class. We don't publish data like that. That's not how we report. We are committed to striving towards that every student has a year's worth of growth, no matter where they start from. And how can we provide a visual to help illustrate that to parents? So in parallel to our LAC teacher platform, we've developed a parent platform where inside there, obviously you get the demographic data at the top, but then they can see their ERB, their map results, and looking at that progress over time. They can click on that little instructional area report button to see how they're developing inside each instructional area of map. We also have our internal assessment data, our grades, but they're visualized as in their progress over the semesters. For upper school, we do letter grades, and sort of how you sort of propose it is a little bit differently because we have semesters and year-end grades, but we use the same colorways as map to sort of highlight those areas again, just to make it easier for a parent to see, oh, how is that child progressing in English? Obviously, English is something they complete all the time, but you also can see electives, which are only semester courses, and how they're progressing across there. So through this platform, especially if the kid has been at the school quite a long time, they're getting all of the data sets which have always been shared with them. These are no new data sets that for parents, but they have all been shared in different places, consolidated in one location where they can go to and see their child's progress over time. And we rolled it out last year, or from Q3, I think we launched it, and we're getting really strong feedback of, oh, wow, like I didn't realize you collected all this data, and going like, yeah, we've shared it with you for years, but now you can just see it in one place. So we got some really nice feedback about it. And hopefully that's sort of starting to integrate that sort of value that we're placing on data with the whole community. And I think, there we go. So while we might sound like we have lots of things going in place, we're really just on a journey, and we're very sort of upfront within it for ourselves, but also with the community of that we are trying to change our practice, but we're not trying to revolutionize everything. We have really great practice going on here, but we're just trying to slowly evolve our practice to ensure that we're collecting the right data, we're having that data available to teachers and families at the right time, and then we're having time to have those conversations. And I'm sure as we grow, that change will evolve and hopefully get better or stronger. Okay, that's it from me, Emma. I don't think I saw anything in the chat, but I could be wrong.
No, nothing in the chat, but that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Will. It's so great to see where everybody's at. But I think for ZIS, just you're really at a point in the journey that I think a lot of schools are looking towards, and it's so nice to kind of hear how that's gone for you and kind of and have some aspirations, but also to know that it's always still in progress. It's always still evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Will? No, he was so thorough. There's just nothing to say.
Like sort of the thing I love about the LAC collaborative for the other people on the call is the collaborative aspect of it all of, I don't know, yes, I don't know, let's say our school has worked really hard on the parent platform, but it's something that can be rolled out to other schools, and same with other engines that other schools are sort of mocking up and prototyping. Of Peter and I have regular calls of just hearing what they're doing, and it sort of sparks little ideas and conversations of how we can grow it from there.
Absolutely. And I think those are in the year that I've been with LAC, that's what I've noticed is the schools that are reaching out and are saying, hey, let's be a thought partner on this and help us think about how we can do this better. Those are the schools where we really see this stuff starting to come together and just have those thriving cultures, which is really exciting.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go, James. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just one thing as you've gone on this journey, I mean, we're looking at data in our schools, but have you found specific protocols to be helpful, or having a standardized protocol or different protocols? Because currently we're trying different things, but I'm just curious.
My go-to is always Atlas looking at data from School Reform Initiative. Do I modify it sometimes? Totally, but
course.
The basic structure the same, of having a moment to enforcing a moment, sorry, to individuals look at data, individuals share collectively, taking turns of what do you notice, and then having that set process of looking at talking about implications and future impacts and saving that for later. Everyone wants to look at data for longer at the beginning, always. But having a set time to look at the data and being fully, you have half your time left, you have a minute left, whatever it is. Yes, no one's going to get a full detailed look at it all, but having that point where a group then shares what do they notice usually surfaces all the points. So yes, someone might have only looked at the first 5 kids, and the other person might have looked at the last 10 kids. Like between as a collective and understanding, or having, I guess, faith in the process is what it is, or the faith in the process of protocols is, as a collective, you're stronger and you'll be able to identify more things than an individual. And sort of that tension, like last Wednesday, we had a all middle and upper school faculty meeting looking at social and emotional data, and it's like 28 questions shared, and only had 5 minutes to look at it. So I knew they weren't going to get time to look at it all, but then they discussed it in teams of 8. And every single team identified all the key points that were there to be had. Then they only took 5 minutes. And I said right at the beginning, if you want to look at this data afterwards, knock yourself out. There'll be more time there. But we have 5 minutes now, and just being strict on it has been the learning, which I keep having to relearn, because sometimes I go, oh no, I'll give them 10 or give them longer. But I don't think I need it. I don't think you need it. So I think going down with Atlas and then going from there is a pretty good thing. I can see Catherine, it's super important not to rush. Give plenty of time. Yeah, for us, 45 minutes is usually not enough. Like we have 45-minute blocks, James, and if you try and hold it during a team teaching, a teacher meeting time, which in reality is probably 35 or 40 minutes when the kids leave, enough time. So having a faculty meeting time, which ours theoretically could go up to 2 hours, but usually a 90 minutes is more than enough. Oh, it's not more than enough. That's enough time. Probably 60.
I'm not sure if you were there, James, but I have I'll just let you know as well that yesterday Lara Manasfi talked a lot about protocols and had some really great suggestions in there too. So those videos will be posted hopefully today, and you'll get the link to those. So I'd check that one out too if you weren't there. I don't remember.
No, I did see hers too. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
James, if you want to
No.
if you want to reach out and chat, that I'm no Sheldon's with you, so you're welcome.
Yeah.
Just reach out.
Yeah, no, for sure. Will.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. The burning questions for Will. All right, I might stop the recording and